Greetings. It's been a while. I have been immersed in several amazing books, and I haven't carved out the space and the time to share that with you, my audience. But this most recent book, well, the last couple of books, I've told myself I gotta share this with somebody. I even started thinking of doing some kind of book club, just because the way I read books may not be the way somebody else reads books. So I would love, to get feedback and insight from others. But in the meantime, in between time, this last book, I was like, I gotta share this with my audience at least. Get these observations out from inside of me and share them with you. And I love doing it here because I have listeners from all over the United States, Canada, the UK, Jamaica, just all kinds of countries, like a whole list of countries I would never reach just on my own, in my own space here in America. So it's the perfect place to share these thoughts that I have about this most recent book. And I'm going to revisit a few more because there are some amazing authors of African descent doing some amazing writing out there. Stories that I wish I had when I was, I guess they call it a mid-school reader, because these stories are amazing. Today's book is Abeni's Song by Djeli Clark, and this book goes real deep. I mean, real deep. The books I've been reading are sci-fi, fantasy, mixed in with, a lot of real, and but picking it out and noticing it is not I saw one lady, she did a review of this book on YouTube, her YouTube channel, and she was like, she didn't have wonderful things to say about it. And it was interesting to me because I had read the book halfway through and I was like, this book is amazing. So it's all about perspective. That's all. We got different perspectives. And the way I'm going to share this book with you, I'm going to read a lot of it, but I'm going to interject my reader's notes as I tend to do. And I hope you enjoy the book as much as I did. Reader's note, it gets real harrowing. It gets real dangerous. I'm surprised it's even considered like a middle school reader because it gets so dangerous. But then when you think about it, man, life is real at all ages, right? So, yeah, let's get into it. Before we get into part 1, chapter 1, let me give you a quick overview so you have an idea of where we're going on this adventure. This overview comes from Goodreads. The book got a 4.5 rating on this website, www.goodreads.com, and it reads as follows. In darkness, a song can lead the way. Beware which one you listen to. Abeni's Song by award-winning author Djeli Clark is the enchanting beginning of an epic West African and African diaspora-inspired fantasy adventure for middle school readers about a reluctant apprentice to magic and the stolen villagers she sets out to save. So yeah, that gives you a bit of background, right? Give you a little bit more background. On the day of the harvest festival, the old woman who lives in the forest appears in Abeni's village with a terrible message. You ignored my warnings. It's too late to run. They are coming. Warriors with burning blades storm the village. A man with a cursed flute plays an impossibly alluring song, and everyone Abeni has ever known and loved is captured and marched toward far-off ghost ships set for even more distant lands. But not Abeni. Abeni is magically whisked away by the old woman. In the forest, Abeni begins her unwanted, magical apprenticeship, her journey to escape the witch, and her impossible mission to bring her people home. Abeni's song is the beginning of a timeless, enchanting fantasy adventure about a reluctant apprentice, a team of spirit kids, and the village they set out to save. And all the genres underneath it: fantasy, middle grade, young adult, mythology, magic, fiction, children's, science fiction, fantasy, adventure, and action. And this book is all of that. All right, now we're ready to get into part 1. Chapter 1, the song. And I want to go back to that first, so important. Everything relates to today. I swear it does. Because, dark times happen. And for Black people, people of the African diaspora, indigenous African people, people of African descent, and all of that, all of the things, right? Music is a core part of our being. Drums, flutes, singing, humming, connection to nature and spirituality is part of who we are, a strong part of who we are. And song is a way that we express it. Music. Song was a part of our history that we don't always know. I've learned it as an adult, how people in certain West African, and maybe even all over the continent, when it comes to indigenous African people, oral history was how things were passed down in a lot of places. And the easiest way to remember something is with a song. How many songs do you know all the lyrics to? But how many books do you know all the words to? So song is a way that it can be captured and remembered. And the oriki is a type of song that tells the story of a person's journey throughout their life. Larger than that, the whole story of a village can be told from the very beginning and then passed down to different generations who add on their part of the song. And it can be sung. And it can be remembered that way. So, and those are in the days of a lot of sunlight and a lot of abundance and goodness and joy and happiness. But darkness comes too. Darkness is a part of life. Just like there is sunlight in daytime, there is darkness in nighttime. And it's the balance of both things that make up our lives. And in darkness, a song can lead you out of darkness, but you have to be aware which one you listen to, which one is touching the core of you. So yeah, I'm getting too far ahead of myself. Chapter 1, the song. Damju awoke to the song. It was a beautiful song. It danced in her head, coming from everywhere, all at once. She sat up, opening her eyes to a familiar world of light and shapes. It was the way she saw, which had always been different from others. It was still night. Night was dull, not like daytime that glowed, and there were night's sounds that lulled her to sleep. Chirping crickets, night birds, and howling animals that shared their small valley. She tilted her head to listen. Only there wasn't any of that now. There was only quiet, like someone had told the world to hush. There was just the song, beautiful and strange, filling up her thoughts. But where was it coming from? Who would be playing music so late? Standing, she ran fingers along the cracked mud walls of her home, careful not to stumble over her mother who lay sleeping. She reached down to put a hand to where her two brothers should have been, but there was only emptiness. Not long ago, Damju could walk easily under calabash bottles hanging from their ceiling, but she'd seen almost 12 harvests now, and the bottles grazed her hair as she moved to the door. She pushed through it and outside. The night air was warm and still strangely quiet. But she wasn't alone. She could just make out the shapes of people moving along narrow, moonlit streets. Some were small, others her height. All children, she realized in surprise. She frowned. What could they be doing? She reached out, catching someone's arm. Wait! What's happening? A breathless reply came. The song, Damju. Can't you hear it? Can't you see? Oh, I'm sorry. Damju recognized the voice. Iwa, who always seemed to forget Damju, saw differently. I hear it. But what do you see? How did you see a song? Iwa fumbled. Her voice was strange, like someone still half asleep. I can't explain, but the song shows you things, beautiful things. Damju was confused. A song that showed you things. Where are all of you going? To find the song, of course, Iwa answered, just like you. What? I'm not. She stopped, realizing her feet were moving, but when had she started walking? The song. She could feel it, pulling at her, urging her on. Iwa shrugged away, leaving Damju between other children, all marching forward like a flowing river. Fighting, she made her feet stop, planting them firm in the middle of the street as others pushed past. Kambo! Doda! She called to her brothers. They had to be out here, but how long ago had they left home? How far might they have gone? The thought made her panic, and she shouted their names over and over into the night. Damju! Someone grabbed her. Her brother, she clutched onto him. Kambo, where's Doda? Right here, her other brother answered. Damju breathed in relief. I thought you were gone. We almost were, Doda snickered. Came back when we heard you calling after us like a loud goat. Dada was always the one to make jokes for once. Dada was always the one to make jokes. For once, Damju didn't laugh. This song, it isn't right. We have to... It's okay, Damju, Kambo said. The songs showed us what's out there, Dada added. What? What did it show you? Baba, Kambo said. He's waiting for us. Damju stared up at the shape of her brother's face, too stunned to answer. Other children passed by, and they were now the only ones just standing. Baba, their father. was gone. He died when she was small. Her brothers remembered him better than she did, but he was gone all the same. Did ghosts walk this night? I know how it sounds, Dada said, but we saw him, Damju, calling us. Something Iwa said came back. The song showed you things, beautiful things. She shook her head. No, it's not real. The song, it's showing you what you want to see. It must want you. It's fine, Damju, Kambo assured her, his voice like Iwa's now, half asleep. We'll come back with Baba. No, don't go. But they were already gone, and her hands clutched at other children who pushed forward. One by one they marched past the village's low stone walls, chasing what the song showed them, the things Damju couldn't see. Somewhere in the valley came another curious sound, a woman's voice. Damju thought the woman might be crying, and she fought to hear the words above the song. The children, he has taken the children, taken them from me, the children of night. When everyone had gone, she stood alone until the song and the voice faded away. Music is a form of magic. And why do I say that? Think about your favorite song. It can bring out feelings in you, memories, thoughts. It can inspire you. It can lift you up. It can bring you down. It can move you. It moves your spirit. Music touches the core of us. And there is some music that can sound good because the beat catches us. But if we listen to it for real, the lyrics are not good for our spirit. So this particular song that the village children were being lured away from their home with was a song that had an agenda. And the agenda was to make them believe the things that weren't real were real. And more important than their life with their family and who they were before they were lured away by that song. And unfortunately, there's music in today's world in 2023 and has been for some time now, music that is not kind to our spirits as Black people, using very foul language, very foul ideas, very foul thoughts, very detrimental things, but luring us away from our core self to go get those things that aren't necessarily real. Yeah, you can touch them, but they're not adding to your life. All the cars and everything that has to do with materialism, I'll just say it. Everything that has to do with, I gotta get more. There's never enough. I gotta get more. Nice things are nice, but they are not above everything else. Nice things are nice, but not when they are detrimental to your life and the lives of your family. It's not okay to do whatever you have to do just to get that thing or to have that look. People have even changed their bodies, their actual self. The Most High gave us these bodies, and people have actually spent a lot of money and did whatever they could to get money to change the body that the Most High gave them. That's a lot. That's a lot. And the music, and we have videos, and so we can see, and we have social media, so all the people who sing the music, especially, I don't want to say especially the women, because the men have changed themselves too, but when it comes to women, it's like going through augmentation to bodies and people dying from these operations, and men altering their bodies to become something that they weren't. Anyway, so music can be used as a tool to either uplift you and take you towards your highest self, your joy, your destiny, the reason you were born, or it can make you a tool for somebody else's use, and they get to decide what you think, how you feel about yourself, your skin tone, your hair, your body, your history, the people you were born to. They get to tell you all of that stuff with their quote-unquote beautiful music. It can be kind of ugly. So this first village in chapter 1, Damju lost all her friends and even her own 2 siblings to that music. And there was nothing she could do about it. They were taken away, led away by the music into darkness. And the reason the music didn't get her was because she could only see shadows. She was born that way. She could only see shadows, like light and movement. So she couldn't see all the things that the music had the other children visualizing. And so the song didn't get her. Thank goodness, right? And she plays an important role as the story goes on. Chapter 2, Festival. Somewhere, very far away, Abeni woke up with a wide-mouthed yawn. She'd been dreaming of a song of all things, but the dream was already getting fuzzy, the way dreams did, and the song and odd voice became distant echoes. Soon she couldn't remember what they sounded like at all. Then she forgot entirely. Today is my birthday. Abeni smiled, taking a long stretch and wriggling her toes. Sunlight crept into her home through slight spaces in the straw roof, bringing the heat of the day to come with it. It was early, but already she could hear the familiar sounds of morning. Chaka-chak, chaka-chak. Her mother pounding yam outside. That meant her aunts were here, and that she'd overslept. Sitting up abruptly from her sleeping mat, she kissed the back of her teeth and shook herself, fully awake, so that her plaited hair swung from side to side. How could she oversleep on today of all days? Abeni? Her mother called from outside. Are you really still sleeping? No, she croaked. Swallowing, she found her voice. I mean, no, Mama. Her mother kissed the back of her teeth, the way she did when she didn't quite believe you. Well, I hope you're dressed. It's almost time to go. Dressed? Abeni looked down to her plain brown tunic and made a face. This wouldn't do. Not for today. She glanced at a pile of her clothes scattered in a corner. They wouldn't do either. She jumped up, meaning to run, then slipped on her sleeping mat and landed with a thud. Abeni, her mother called. What's all that noise? What's going on in there? Nothing, Mama, she called back, hopping on one foot while nursing a stubbed toe and glaring at the sleeping mat. This wasn't how this morning was supposed to go. Hurrying, she ran from her room. Her father had built their house before she was born, making it older than her. It had one long, circular wall that was smooth to the touch and smelled of old earth. Smaller walls divided the house into separate parts. She passed through the cooking chamber where her mother's planting tools hung beside her father's hunting weapons. Reaching her parents' chamber, she found a bundle of neatly folded cloths with colorful prints. Her mother's best wrap skirts, which she was not supposed to touch. But she needed something nice for today. Rifling through them, she settled on a bright gold one with spirals like little red snakes. Abeni, her mother's voice had that tone in it now. Do I have to come in there and get you? No, Mama, just a moment. Finding a large jug of water, she checked her reflection. She'd thought that today, her 12th birthday, her face would seem different, more grown, but it looked the same as the day before and the one before that. Brown eyes and a dark brown face with a fleshy nose above lips people claimed made it look like she was pouting. Her tight coils of black hair had been parted down the middle and plaited into thin hanging braids that she could swing back and forth. That had taken her aunts hours to finish yesterday. They hadn't done it too tight, but it still hurt a bit if she raised her eyebrows. Opening her mouth, she examined her teeth to see if they'd grown. Nope, still the same size, even the same overbite. Altogether, she looked very much the same. But it was her birthday. She was older. That was all that mattered. Abeni, did you fall asleep? Back asleep, girl. She broke away from her reflection. I'm awake. No time for a long bath. Wriggling out of her tunic, she scrubbed and dried quickly, wrapping the gold cloth about her. She tucked it in here and there, just right to make it stay on. She wasn't any taller than any other girl her age in the village, but her mother and aunts fretted about her skinniness. Her father teased he'd have to tie rocks to her feet to make sure a strong breeze didn't carry her away. She didn't find that funny. She looked down with a smile. The cloth was nice as a skirt on her mother, but as a dress, it looked wonderful on her. Still, it was missing something. Rifling through more of her mother's things, she found a set of necklaces. Settling on one with sparkling green and red stones and snatching up the matching pieces nearby. As she fitted on the jewelry, her eyes caught sight of a small soapstone jar carved like a frog, where her mother kept her sweet oils. Opening the jar, she scooped out a handful and rubbed it everywhere. Satisfied, she slipped into her favorite red-brown sandals and stopped to admire herself. Or tried to. Benny, if you're not out here by the time I count to... She was out the door before her mother even finished the sentence. Her village was alive. Everywhere were other rounded houses like her own, their brown straw roofs today decorated with colorful flowers and strips of bright cloth. People moved about in the streets, some with arms full, others holding clay jars atop their heads, their voices louder than usual in the early morning. Look here, the princess has awakened to greet us. Abeni looked to see her father smiling at her. He wore a white kilt that fell to his feet, alongside strips of leather with black and red designs that hung from his waist. His shoulders and chest were bare, except for fresh spirals of white chalk. Akanyo, I didn't know you were hosting the daughter of a chief, the man who painted her father's skin added. "That must be it," her father said, as if surprised. "The daughter of a chief." Abeni rolled her eyes but smiled. Her uncle, Tawayo, and her father loved to joke. The two were the strongest men in the village, and everyone respected them as great hunters. Today, they were dressed almost exactly alike. Even their hair was the same, shaved on all sides except for a flat patch at the top. "What do you say, Afayo?" Her father nudged her brother. "Doesn't your sister look like a chief's daughter?" Her brother looked up from where he sat, decorating a long spear with bits of rope and beads. He wore his hair just like the two men, though he still looked like a boy. He gazed lazily at her dress before turning back with a shrug. "She looks okay." Abeni frowned. "Okay?" She simply looked okay? Her brother had seen 3 more harvests than her, but they'd always been close. Now he was all puffed up with himself, keeping to other older boys who soon would be counted as men. Well, not today. She ran over and tackled him, seeking the tickle spots she knew all too well. He cried out, but it was too late. Between his protests, he laughed until finally managing to twist away. "Aye, you crazy little monster. Okay, you look nice." "How nice?" she asked, wriggling her fingers in threat. "Very, very nice." He held up hands to ward her off. Pausing, he sniffed the air and wrinkled his nose, smelling the sweet oil. "But the chief's daughter stinks." She stuck out her tongue. He made a face back. "It certainly took the chief's daughter long enough to come out here, and it seems the two of us have the same tastes." Abeni turned at her mother's voice. She was using a long wooden pestle stick to pound the contents of a wide wooden bowl. A green skirt with leaf patterns stretched to her ankles, and a bright white fabric wrapped about her chest. At the moment, she eyed her daughter's dress with interest. "I thought you might like it?" Abeni asked sheepishly. Her mother raised an eyebrow, never stopping her pounding. It was hard to tell what she was thinking when she made that face. It always made Abeni squirm. She had tried to perfect it herself, but never seemed to get it quite right. "Let the girl be, Yayawi," a short, plump woman beside her mother chided. "How can the branch of a tree not resemble its roots?" Yes, Yayawi," another chimed in. "She's growing more into your face each day. Might as well grow into some of your clothes, too." Both women laughed. Her mother's older sisters, Aunt Awami and Aunt Awomi. They were twins. Not only did they look alike, down to their round moon faces and dimples, they thought alike and sometimes finished each other's sentences. They were her favorite aunts. They each gave her knowing winks, and she returned them back. Everyone claimed she looked just like her mother. The same nose, high cheeks, round eyes, and those lips made for pouting. But where Abeni was gangly, her mother was solid, with strong arms and legs. Not as stout as her sisters, whose wide hips swayed when they walked, but she certainly wasn't in danger of being carried away by a strong wind. "Well, can she help her mother pound yam? I was calling you awake to get you to help us, or is the princess too good for that?" Abeni beamed, matching her mother's growing smile. She bounded over to the large bowl that stood to her waist, peering down at the orange half-mashed bits. "Here, have mine." Her Aunt Awami handed over a pestle, showing Abeni how to grasp the long wooden stick properly. She'd often watched her mother pound yam, but they'd never asked her to take part. "Hold it with both hands, strong." Abeni nodded, excited. When her mother brought down her pestle, she waited to hear her Aunt Awomi's fall before letting her own drop in rhythm. Chaka-chak, chaka-chak. Behind her, Aunt Awami sang about a woman who stole her neighbor's yam. Only it was magic and would jump when she struck it. Aunt Awami called out, and they answered like the frustrated woman. Yam, stop jumping in my bowl. Yam, stop jumping in my bowl. When they finished, the yams were an orangey mush. Abeni let out a breath. Her arms were tired. Reader's note. Even when they cooked, indigenous African people have that beat. Chaka-chak, 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 eh, chaka-chak, chaka-chak. And they're singing a song to that rhythm to make the work easier to do. Songs are like magic. So, back to the... Also, when it's harvest time in indigenous West Africa, from the things that I've learned, drummers used to come out and help with the work. So when people were drumming and workers were working in the fields, it didn't seem as long as a day or as hard a day because they were keeping the beat and maybe even some songs or even humming to, make the work go faster. Not faster, just make it easier to get through, I would say. Back to the story. Wearing my clothes and now pounding yam, her mother remarked, my little rain bringer is soon going to outgrow me. There was a sadness in her voice, though Abeni couldn't imagine why. Her mother cried, wrinkling her nose. Abeni, did you take a swim in my sweet oil? Her brother barked a laugh. Abeni quickly changed subjects. Today is my birthday, she reminded. Her mother frowned, but her voice softened. Yes, it is. Have I ever told you about the day you were born? Abeni groaned. Just about 100 times. Don't be like that. It used to be your favorite story. When she was little, she was 12 now. I'd like to hear it, her brother called with a grin. Abeni turned and crossed her eyes at him. He made a sillier face back. Yes, her mother murmured, as if just remembering. It had been a very dry season right before you were born, and the village saw little rain. I remember that time, Uncle Tawayo added. There were fires in the forest because it was so hot. All the animals ran off, and we had little to hunt. Even the river began to dry up. The whole village worried, Aunt Awami said, scooping mashed yam out of the pounding bowl and into a large clay pot. Every day we asked the spirits for rain. And you were in my belly, her mother added, smiling. That is because you knew how hot it was, her father said. Everyone laughed, and Abeni winced. Please let this story be over. Your mother's belly was big, like a melon with you, Aunt Awomi said, helping to scoop yam. We took her to the healer to see if he could find a way to make you come out, but he didn't know what to do, so he sent your father to see the old woman. She said the last words almost as a whisper. The old woman. Abeni didn't know her real name because that was all anyone called her. The other children said she was a witch, and grown-ups whispered the same. Whoever she was, she lived by herself in the forest and hadn't come to the village since before Abeni was born. What was it the old woman told you to do, Akanyo? Uncle Tawayo teased. Her father made a face behind his beard. Beat a drum and dance around Yayawi at night, Uncle Tawayo bellowed with laughter. Your father beat that drum and danced very well, her mother said, giving him a teasing wink. Uncle Tawayo laughed even harder. And it must have worked because that night, two things happened. It rained, and you decided it was time to be born. You were almost as big a talk around the village as the rains, Aunt Awami said. And that's how I got my name, Abeni finished, so they could get to the end. Yes, her mother said. Abeni. We asked for her. And behold, she came. When the first harvest of those rains came, the village decided that day would be your true birthday, for what your luck brought us. And that is why, at every harvest festival, everyone calls you Little Rain Bringer. Abeni smiled, despite herself. Okay, so she did like that part of the story. And how many harvests has it been now, Yayawi? Aunt Awomi asked. 12, her mother answered. So many? Aunt Awami exclaimed. She came over to pinch Abeni's cheeks. Just one more, and you'll be ready to take your first rites at festival. I'll be a woman, Abeni proclaimed. Maybe then she could just be Rainbringer, and they could leave out the little. Also, they'd stop pinching her cheeks. The three women burst into laughter, and she frowned. What was so funny? Her mother smiled. You won't be quite a woman, little Rainbringer. There are more rites to follow, and you've got some growing to do yet. But you'll be on your way. Not if I can help it, her father bent down, bringing his forehead to touch hers, and they both smiled wide at each other. Everyone said she had her father's smile, so big and bright that it made others do the same. Don't try to grow so fast, little Rainbringer, or I'll take out my hunting spear and chase away any little man with a boy's face who comes asking to marry you. Her brother snickered, and Abeni felt her face grow hot. Why were they so intent on embarrassing her? Going to have to fatten her up some before then, Akanyo, Aunt Awami taunted, patting her hips. Those young men are going to want something more to hold on to. Please, Abeni thought, make them stop. She was saved by the sound of someone approaching. She turned to see a girl her age running up and waving excitedly. Fomi, Abeni called. Fomi was her best friend, though in some ways the two couldn't be more different. Where Abeni was gangly, Fomi was stout and stronger than some boys their age. Where Abeni was quiet, Fomi could be loud, very, very loud. And where Abeni tried to avoid trouble, most of the time, Fomi loved getting into mischief. That was probably why they were such good friends. Fomi made her life more exciting. Abeni made hers a little less reckless. And today, they had plans. Good morning, Fomi, her mother greeted her. How are your sisters coming with that pepper soup? Fomi's father had 3 wives, and between them, she counted at least 10 sisters. Whenever there was festival, they cooked up the biggest pot of soup for everyone to share. Good morning, Auntie Yayawi, Fomi answered with a deep bow. They're almost finished. And you aren't helping? Fomi screwed up her face. I scaled and cut fish all yesterday and this morning. I've helped enough. The girl hated anything to do with fish, which was odd since her family were the best fishers in the village. I was hoping Abeni and I could look around before festival. Oh, yes. Can I go, Mama? But you always help me bring the food to festival, her mother said. Yes, but I could do something different this time, maybe. Her mother opened her mouth to say something else, but Aunt Awami spoke first. Oh, let the child be, Yayawi. We'll help you bring the food. That's right, Aunt Awomi joined in. You can't expect her to keep clutching at your skirts. She's not a little girl anymore. Whatever her mother had been about to say seemed to evaporate on her lips. I suppose she isn't. Well, the two of you go. Go on then. Her eyes narrowed. And you won't be off getting into any trouble. The two girls exchanged a hurried glance. Oh no, Auntie Yaya, Fomi assured. Definitely not, Abeni added. No way, they both said together. Did your mother get you that dress for your birthday? Fomi asked as they walked. Abeni smirked, showing off the skirt. Sort of. You're so lucky. On my birthday, there's no harvest festival. Even with 3 mothers, all I get are smelly, scaly fish. Blech. I wish someone had gone to see a witch before I was born. She's just an old woman, Abeni said. Fomi shook her head. Pretty certain she's a witch. Ever gone to see her? No, Abeni replied in alarm. Why would I do that? Fomi put on a croaking witch voice. One day, little rain bringer, I'll come back to take the one that got away. Abeni pretended to shriek, and the two laughed, making their way through the bustling village, where the sounds of drums and songs were beginning to fill the morning air. With Fomi taking the lead, they stuck greedy fingers into cooking pots, snuck away with small fruits, sweetened porridge, and other treats. They even harassed some practicing stilt walkers. A few people threatened to tell their families, but neither girl paid them much attention. It was festival. No one was getting punished today. There it is, Fomi pointed as they finished off some fried yam they'd snatched off a plate. The two girls stopped at a walled enclosure painted in colorful symbols. From the other side, they could hear people chanting and calling out. This was their destination. How are we going to get in? Fomi whispered, eyeing 2 big women who stood guard at a doorway. Not that way for sure. Abeni motioned to a space near the back of the enclosure. There, we can peek over the wall. Fomi shielded her eyes from the sun, glancing up as they approached. We can't climb that. True, the wall was smooth all around. There was nothing to hold on to. One of us can just get on the other's shoulders, Abeni offered. Fomi stared flatly. You mean you can get on my shoulders? Abeni shrugged. You're the strong one. I'll be quick, promise. Fomi sighed, motioning for her to hop up. Surprised you came up with this idea, she grunted as Abeni climbed onto her back. Usually that's what I do. This is important, Abeni said, balancing on her friend's shoulders, then added hastily, not that what you do isn't, just, well, this one I wanted to do. It was why she'd arranged for Fomi to arrive, to get her away from being her mother's helper as she usually was each festival. She had to lift up on her toes, but she managed to get to the top of her head, just over the wall's edge, to see inside the enclosure. It was a big, wide, empty space. This was where the village wrestlers and warriors practiced, trampling the earthen ground, but today it was filled with women and girls. One woman stood out, wearing a long blue and yellow dress. Her face was painted in similar colors and covered in white dots, while a matching cloth wrapped her hair. She danced and sang, holding a bushy tree branch over her head with leaves painted gold. A circle of girls knelt before her, each dressed much the same, as she touched the bushy branch across their shoulders. Abeni's eyes rounded as she took it in. This was what they had come to see. These girls were completing their first rites on the path to womanhood. Here they would be tested, learn secrets, and be given new names. They would even start wearing their hair different. When it was done, they would be presented to the village. Next harvest, it would be her and Fomi in the enclosure. There were all sorts of stories of the things they would have to do and endure. She wanted to see for herself. So, when it was their turn, they'd be ready. "What are you seeing?" Fomi whispered. "What's happening?" "All kinds of stuff," Abeni whispered back. "What kind of stuff? I want to see stuff." "Oh, wo." Abeni frowned. "Did you just say a wo?" "No, I said equolo, coming this way." "Equolo?" Abeni spun her head around. Sure enough, walking towards them was a group of boys. Two were Adwe and Danwe, sons of the village's blacksmith. But the one Fomi was talking about, the one who caught her eyes, was Equolo. Equolo was only a short season older than her, but he was already a well-known name in the village. Fast for his age, he bested all the other boys in games. By the next harvest season, he would be completing his first rites too. Abeni had known him most of her life, and they'd played together since they were young. So she wasn't certain when the sight of him had started making her stomach flutter and her mouth go dry. It was an odd sensation that made her excited and nervous all at once. "Abeni," he called out, jogging over. She lifted a hand to wave, forgetting that it was helping her balance. Her feet went out from under her, and she tumbled down atop Fomi, who let out a yelp. The two managed to scramble to their feet, with Abeni's face burning. Her eyes met Equolo, who laughed lightly as he reached them. "Trying to see some first rites?" he asked, winking. Abeni opened her mouth to deny it, but he only smiled. "We were just trying to do the same thing." He turned to his companions. "Should have thought about hopping on your shoulders, Danwe," his attention fixed back on Abeni. "I like your dress. You look nice." Abeni blushed at the compliment. "Thank you. So do you. Your clothes, I mean, not your dress." "Be quiet now," a voice in her head said. Fomi rolled her eyes, shaking her head. This wasn't the first time Abeni had embarrassed herself like this. "Enjoying your birthday?" Equolo asked. "So far," she said. He actually remembered. "Are you? The harvest festival, I mean, not my birthday." "Be quiet," the voice in her head warned again. But her mouth seemed to have a mind of its own. "I don't expect you to enjoy my birthday. I mean, you have your own birthday." "Be quiet, be quiet, be quiet." The voice was pleading now. Clamping her mouth shut, she did just that, her cheeks heating as Equolo smiled wider. She must have sounded crazier than the village's timekeeper who lived out near the spirit rocks and claimed he could talk to birds. "The morning sun has your tongue doing fits," Abeni, Danwe teased. Before she could respond, Fomi was doing so for her. "You be quiet, stork legs. No one's talking to you." Danwe scowled, rounding on the shorter girl. He did have thin legs that looked too long for his body. People said he'd grow into them, but he hated any reminder. "I thought I smelled fish," he sneered. "Shouldn't you be off scaling some?" "It would take a big old stork to smell some fish, wouldn't it?" Fomi barked back. Abeni snorted. Fomi was always ready to catch her when she stumbled. Equolo laughed, patting his friend on the shoulder. "Easy, Danwe, easy," he said. "Quiet down before someone comes back and sees us, eh?" His eyes returned to Abeni. "We're heading to watch your father and uncle practice the warrior dance." At the mention, the other boys began chattering eagerly. Her father and uncle were not only the village's best hunters, they were also its best warriors. Equolo and his friends could spend whole mornings watching the two spar with swords or practice with shields and spears. She'd seen her father and uncle practice lots of times, and while it was impressive, she didn't understand the fascination. The closest thing to a battle she'd ever heard of had been between some goat herders and those from a nearby village. Only old people with no teeth even remembered it. From what she understood, the battle mostly consisted of men and boys beating each other with herding sticks. It all ended when their fed-up goats began scattering away, and the herders had to go off chasing them. Since the Great Goat War, there'd been nothing similar. Nothing much happened here in the Djembe forest. Her village was one of maybe a dozen that she knew of that called the forest home. Life here was pretty uneventful. People traded. Sometimes they argued over hunting grounds or water, but they didn't fight. Before she could say anything else, a cry rang out. They all jumped, and for a moment, Abeni feared they'd been caught. But no one was coming for them. Instead, there was chanting. They all walked hurriedly to the front of the enclosure to see what the matter was. Just as the doors began to open, the woman in the long blue and yellow dress came out, chanting and dancing while holding the bushy tree branch with gold leaves over her head. Behind her trailed the girls in pairs of twos, each copying her dance. Everyone stopped to watch them pass, and Abeni felt a pang of envy. Next festival, this would be them. Abeni! The call took her by surprise. It came from one of the dancing girls. Breaking from her companions, she ran over, beaming with her painted face. It took Abeni a moment to recognize her, but when she did, she grimaced. Sowoke, she said, forcing a smile. Sowoke was the daughter of the village's most prosperous trader. She had seen one more harvest than either Abeni or Fomi, and never missed the chance to remind them. I've completed my first ritual, she exclaimed. That's good, Sowoke, Abeni replied. I'm happy for you. Thank you, she said, looking Abeni over. Such a pretty dress. For your birthday? I think my mother has a skirt just like it. Abeni's smile tightened. Do you like mine? Sowoke asked. She lifted the sides of her deep blue dress for Abeni to see. Of course. It was beautiful, with intricate gold patterns. And these, she pointed to a matching silver necklace and wrist pieces. Father brought them from a trader who says they came from far outside the forest. The people who make them live in a dry, hot place with no trees or bushes or rivers at all. Can you believe that? He says it's called a desert, and I don't believe it, Fomi broke in. Sowoke stopped and made a face as if she'd eaten some sour fruit. In her eyes, Fomi's family of fishers barely needed to be acknowledged or spoken to. Don't believe what? She asked, irritated at being cut off. In that desert or whatever, Fomi answered. There's no such place. Sowoke's eyes narrowed. Are you calling my father a liar, fisher girl? Fomi only shrugged. Either that or someone who easily believes stories. That stuff probably came from some village right here in the forest. She looked the older girl up and down and sniffed. I hope he didn't trade away too much for it. Sowoke was scowling now. She stood her full height and seemed on the verge of telling Fomi off when suddenly she stopped and let out a long breath. Believe whatever you want. I don't have time to play children's games. I'm on my way to being a woman now. One day you'll understand. She took to smoothing down her dress and held her head up high. Before either Abeni or Fomi could respond, she turned to the boys. Adwe, Danwe, she said sweetly, the two of you look like young warriors. The brothers beamed brightly, stumbling over each other to return the compliment. Fomi made a face as if she were going to be sick. Ikwolo, you haven't said anything about my dress. It looks very nice, Sowoki, he replied calmly. Abeni bit back a smile. Sowoki was pretty. That was true. But Ikwolo would never make a fool of himself over her, which was more than could be said for his friends. But the girl behaved as if he had showered her with praise. Thank you, Ikwolo. You will be there to see me dance at festival, won't you? Of course, but we have to get going if we want to see the warriors practice. Turning to go, he smiled at Abeni. I'll see you there then. With that, he and his friends trotted off. Abeni watched them go, disappointed they didn't get to talk longer. I think that Ikwolo likes me, Sowoki commented. The words snapped Abeni's neck sideways. What makes you say that? Didn't you see the way he was looking at me and going on and on about my dress? Abeni exchanged a glance with Fomi, who pretended to strangle herself. I didn't see that, Abeni said. Her tone was more snappish than she intended, and Sowoki's eyes narrowed, studying Abeni before rounding again. You like Ikwolo, she blurted out, genuine surprise in her voice. Abeni felt like someone had just slapped her. She opened her mouth to say otherwise, but something in Sowoki's gaze saw right through her. Stupid, stupid, the voice in her head whispered. Oh, that's wonderful, Sowoki clapped. She leaned close, excited. Does he know? Are you going to tell him? Abeni's face flushed under the questioning. Let it alone, Sowoki, Fomi warned. The older girl flashed Fomi a cold look before smiling at Abeni. Abeni, I didn't mean to upset you. Don't worry, your secret's safe with me. After all, we're friends. She let out a breath. Well, I have to get back. See you at festival. Then she was gone, leaving Abeni to stare after her. That Sowoki, Fomi fumed. You just wait. We'll get itching root and smear it all on her fancy clothes. Or dip her sandals in fish guts. She listed off several more pranks, each more daring than the next. But Abeni shook her head. No, she said. Fomi looked ready to protest, but Abeni continued, it's my birthday, and it's harvest festival. Why worry about silly old Sowoki? She tried to push thoughts of the girl whispering into Ikwolo's ear out of her head. Besides, next year, it'll be our turn to go through first rites, and she won't be able to tell us a thing. Fine, Fomi muttered, crossing her arms. You're right. No pranks on her today, but there's always tomorrow, and I know where to get lots of fish guts. Abeni laughed, and Fomi smiled deviously. Now come on, I also know where we can get some sweet cakes. With that, her friend broke into a run. Abeni followed, the thought of the cakes dismissing worries from her mind. It was, after all, her birthday. And nothing was going to ruin it. Abeni and Fomi cried out as a dancer in a painted mask of wood and iron reared up in front of them. His face was menacing, with fiery eyes, a scowling downturned mouth, and sharp teeth. His body swayed to beating drums and clapping chants from the crowd, making the ornaments he wore rattle and shake. He was a spirit, meant to frighten disobedient children, and he demanded payment in sweets, his favorite meal. This was the last harvest festival he'd be able to go after Abeni and Fomi before they completed their first rite, and he seemed intent on reminding the two that they weren't big enough to escape him yet. They quickly answered his demands, throwing morsels into his open bag. Satisfied, he danced away, moving off to harass others. Abeni and Fomi laughed, watching him go, but he didn't hold their attention long. Harvest Festival was filled with too many sights and sounds to linger in any one place. There were men on stilts who wrapped their bodies in long, flowing fabrics, making them appear as giants. Others were covered in straw, strips of bright cloth, or bushy leaves that jumped and shook as they went. There were figures in alligator masks, long-billed birds, and even giant yams. Some had friendly faces, others were horrid and spit fire from their mouths. They were spirits, animal spirits, bush spirits, river spirits, sky spirits, even spirits of what was planted and grown, and they were all here to celebrate the harvest. Of course, Abeni knew these were just people from her village, but with their masks and costumes, for a short while, they became the spirits. She and Fomi called out to the friendly ones and clutched each other at the sight of the frightening ones. Earlier, she had seen her father and uncle leading the warrior spirits, their faces covered in veils of stringed, domed white shells as they jabbed their spears toward away other bad spirits. During these magical moments, the village became a place where spirits jumped and sang and danced. It was well into the day, and the sun beat down on them, all from above in a clear blue sky. But there was too much excitement for anyone to complain. And so much food. The village's harvest was laid out on a large straw mat that seemed to stretch on forever. Families had prepared their best meals to share: pepper soup and smoked fish, yam porridge and moi moi, spicy red rice and boiled quail eggs, goat meat stew and chicken stew, mashed plantain and grated coconut wrapped in steaming banana leaves, and so much more. She and Fomi stuffed their mouths until their bellies were near bursting and things were far from over. When the sun set, masked dancers swathed in colors that glowed in the dark would perform in front of raging fires. All the houses had been painted with symbols and patterns that would shine just as bright. It would make their village truly look like the land of spirits. Abeni was licking the gooey bits of a sweet yellow fruit from her fingers when Fomi grabbed her and pointed with a gasp at the appearance of new figures. The deep boom of drums announced their arrival as they moved in a slow dance. All of them were women, dressed in streams of white cloth, while their faces were hidden behind red veils with white shells. Atop each of their heads was a wooden carving of snakes, all twisted into each other. It was the secret women's society, which people claimed had been around since the village's founding. The snakes on their heads represented wisdom, and their faces were hidden like their secrets. Everyone knew it was them who advised the men's council that helped run the village. Abeni watched them quietly as they passed, feeling a tingle of fear and awe. Both her mother and her aunts were members of the society. Someday, hopefully, she would be too. When one of the veiled women came directly towards her, she backed away hurriedly with the rest of the crowd. Everyone knew they were now filled with powerful magic and not to be touched. But as the woman paused for a moment to dance right before her, Abeni caught a familiar scent. Sweet oil, just like what she wore. Mama, she thought silently, smiling in recognition, and for the briefest moment, beneath that veil, she thought she saw her smile back. She was so taken by her mother's presence that she didn't notice the drums falter. It was only when the women stopped dancing that she realized something was wrong. There was no more clapping, no more singing, or even laughing. Everyone had gone still, looking off in one direction. Abeni tried her best to get a view, but with all the grown-ups now standing and crowding around, she couldn't see a thing. There was a nudge from Fomi, who pointed to some abandoned stools. Hurrying, the two girls scrambled atop them, standing on their toes and craning their necks. What Abeni saw sent her eyes wide. It was a woman, a very old woman. She leaned on a long piece of twisted and knotted wood she used as a staff. Her shoulders were wrapped in colorful shawls that sat over a long brown dress, while a thick bundle of beads hung from her neck. She had skin dark and brown like the color of earth, making it look as if she'd been plucked right out of the ground. Only her hair stood out, thick and long white locks that fell to her back. She stood there for a long time, the village staring at her while she glowered back from behind piercing dark eyes. It was Fomi who spoke, her voice a breathless whisper. Witch. Abeni nodded numbly. It was the witch indeed. The Harvest Festival. One of my favorite chapters. I can't say that because I like this book a lot, but I like the detail. It was like giving a full picture of what life was like in the villages of West Africa. Well, the interior villages, because there were also people who lived on the coast. But this happened to be the interior villages, the villages that were more protected from the influence of traders from the outside. Only Sowoki's father he's the most prosperous trader. I'm sure there were other traders, but he traded with other people, so she had knowledge of the desert. But Fomi, where her people fished at the river, they didn't have knowledge of the desert or even the sea, the beach, the area where the ocean came up to their shores. They were interior West Africans. And so this was their world. They grew their own food. They worked and traded with each other. Some people obviously traveled, like Sowoki's father, and had idea of the outer world outside of the forest. But they were pretty contained, and they were doing well, and they had a great life. And I love how they were very aware of their connection to the spirit world, and they had respect for it, and even celebrated the different spirits that ruled over different areas, like the river, or certain animals, or the sky, and what have you. And it's interesting how the Harvest Festival coincides with other harvest festivals that other indigenous people celebrate. How the use of masks to allow the person to take over the feeling of that spirit, the energy of that spirit, and how they would throw candy at the spirits to appease them and make them go on their way. Not unlike other festivals where people wear masks and throw candy at the mask wearer to get them to leave them alone. Very interesting. But again, a full life. Unfortunately, this particular Harvest Festival was interrupted with the coming of the old woman out of the forest. I like the fact that Abeni didn't refer to her as necessarily a witch. But Fomi was like, nah, kid, that's a witch. And it had to be serious because they said the last time she came to the village was when Abeni was in her mommy's belly, and Abeni's now 12. So she hasn't come in all that time. You know it's about to be serious. Very serious. That's it for today. I will be doing chapter 3 and 4 very soon, so stay tuned.